and Michael Shann, who are going to read a couple of poems each. So if you could all put yourselves on mute, if you haven't already, I will begin. So our first reader from Forest Poets is Eithne Cullen. Eithne was one of the winners of the Poetry Society members competition in Poetry News in spring 2020. She's also done well in the Pre-Raphaelite Society competitions. She was commended in 2018 and was second in their journal competition in 2020. And she's also poet in residence for the Hysteria writing competition. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first poet, Eithne Cullen.
Thank you, Paul. That's a lovely introduction. Good evening, everybody. I've got two poems to read this evening, and on the first one, I needed to ask someone for a ruling, so please help me or forgive me if I'm wrong. My first poem was inspired by an Ivan Boland poem, which you might know, called Quarantine. It's a poem about the famine, and I've used it as a bit of an inspiration to write about something that's been happening in 2020, and it's called The Worst Year. In the worst hours of the worst year of COVID terror, dread and rage, we stepped into the evening to applaud the heroes, curse the fools. A woman bore a child no grandparent could hold, but held a little later in the joy and pride she brought, smiles mocking the adult world of fear. On the ward, the therapist sweated behind the plastic of her masks. Teenage acne came to mock her efforts, no matter how she sanitized. A group of women cut up sheets to sew them up again as bags for washing scrubs. Laudable efforts, practical aptitude to give. The nation rushed to watch the bungling politicians making it up as they went along and bend the rules to suit their ends, own goals. In hospitals, on ventilators, masked and reaching out to touch or not, and know the loss of those loved ones mean nothing on a slide showing a graph. And those deaths have no noble stature. The numbers never show the love of parent, child, or lover pressed up to the glass to see a loved one pass. Outside the funeral parlour, two figures stand, supernumerary mourners who can only guess the words spoken. Inside, feeling bitter, cold of segregation. In the worst hours of the worst year of COVID terror, dread and rage, we stepped into the evening to applaud the heroes, curse the fools. So a little bit on the side, I think, but my second poem is more of a joyful one. In 2020, I also became a grandmother, and I've written a ghazal, a love poem for my granddaughter. In my arms tonight, a baby sits, clear skin, bright eyes, disarming smile. This is my love song to you, my dear child, who's come to bring light to our lives. That heat, that warmth that comes from you, I hold your body close in pure delight. Your legs and arms so strong and firm, your dark blue eyes, your skin so white. Starting your life secure in love, coddled. It feels so right to see you sitting here. You grow and change as each day comes and goes. Your grandmother watches. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Eithne Cullen. Our second poet is Michael Shann, who is also a forest poet. Michael works for the charity Carers UK. He's had 3 collections published by the Walthamstow-based Paikakariki Press. The books that he's had published, I have 2 of them. I'm ashamed not to have all 3, so I'll have to put that right. So he's published Euphrasia with Paikakariki Press, and also his second collection called Walthamstow, which is a lovely introduction from me in it. So it's worth getting even for that, as well as Michael's poems. And his third collection is called To London. He has a forthcoming collection coming out this year, which is called To London 2, the follow-up to To London, I would assume. Please welcome Michael Shann.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks, Eithne, for that reading. Lovely to hear you read, Eithne, as always. And yeah, really looking forward to hearing Jonathan read in a few minutes too. So I've got two poems. And I'm guessing, as well as many of you this evening, as well as loving listening to poetry and reading poetry, that many of you also write poetry. And I've got two poems about writing poetry. I think my only two poems about writing poetry. And this first one is about the envy of writers for other writers. And I should admit, I suppose, that it's about this particular writer's envy for other writers. And based on, you may have seen in one of the Saturday papers, I think it was the Guardian magazine, had a long running series called Writers' Rooms. I always love reading, but always felt slightly envious of. So this is called Writers' Rooms. Oh, sorry. Writers' Rooms. God, I'm jealous when I read in the Saturday paper about his neat little hut at the bottom of the garden with its threadbare Kashmiri rug, its wood burner and old pine desk picked up for a song some years back, about the battered Olivetti he bought with the royalties from his first novel, and his little ritual of waking at 6:50 to the morning news, having eggs and hot coffee. Isn't coffee always hot? Walking the children to school, then working in the hut till noon. God, I hate myself for thinking this way, but when I read about the writer plodding through the morning one word at a time, about the frost on the lawn and the sunlight singing it, how at times he might be distracted by a blackbird tugging a worm from the grass. I fancy myself as the worm, dangling from the blackbird's beak. And when I look up and see his writerly face in the small wooden window, his chin resting Rodin-like on a cupped hand, I just want to be swallowed quickly and whole. Right, and my second poem was inspired by a chapter in a book that some of you may have read that came out a couple of years ago, called How to Be a Poet. I'd really recommend it, edited by Joe Bell and Jane Kamain, and it's lots of really helpful chapters, articles about the kind of business of being a poet, sending things off to competitions and getting things published. And I found it really helpful. And there was a chapter that really stuck with me by the poet Robert Peake, and it was called Making Peace with Poetry. And he was talking about, what success means to him as a poet, and about part of that success with just keeping at it, keeping writing. We all get lots of rejections as poets, and but just ignoring them and just keeping at it. So this poem, which is from the new book of London poems that Paul mentioned, I'm hoping to have come out this year, and they're all 8-line poems, 4 couplets, which are inspired by some of the ancient Chinese poets. And this poem is called Parliament Hill. You say the sky fits the skyline perfectly. I say it's a bit like that with failure. How you look at it, I mean. Go easy on yourself. You have written the poems that you needed to write. You've kept going. You've learned to love a sunlit breeze in the tops of oaks and sycamores. See now, isn't it beautiful anyhow? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael Shann. Excellent poems. I'm really looking forward to your next collection. So now we have our main reader, Jonathan Edwards, all the way from Wales. Jonathan, as you probably all know, has 2 collections with Seren, My Family and Other Superheroes, won the Costa Poetry Award and was also Wales Book of the Year People's Choice. And his second collection, Jen, was also the Wales Book of the Year People's Choice. And Jonathan is very popular with the people of Wales, obviously. I'm just going to admit somebody. He was appointed the editor of Poetry Wales in 2019 and is also the judge of one of the judges of this year's National Poetry Competition. So hopefully many of you in this call might actually get some little comments from Jonathan about your fantastic poems in the next few weeks, who knows. So please welcome Jonathan Edwards.
Oh, thanks so much, Paul. A really lovely introduction, and thanks so much for having me and for this event. It's just really lovely to be here, and wonderful readings by Michael and Eithne. I really loved those readings. Thanks for sharing those poems. Just brilliant to hear. Paul kindly gave me 2 options for this reading. One was to read for half an hour. The other was to read for as long as I want. So I'm going to take the second option, and I'm aiming for about a 12-hour reading. I think during the 4th hour, I'll have exhausted my written oeuvre. So at that point, I'll be making up poems spontaneously on the spot when we get to the small hours, if anyone is still lingering at that point. But seriously, I think timing at poetry reading should sort of run along the lines of the attitude to timing of the people who stick up the tube train in the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. You know, if you go over the time, then the hostages are going to start getting shot. So no more than half an hour, I think. And I'm going to start with a poem about the snow, because I've loved the snow the last couple of days. I don't know how it is where you are, but the snow here has been really fantastic. And I think that particularly at the moment, because obviously the situation we're in, the days can be quite monotone. Anything which changes things the way that the snow does is particularly fantastic. And I think particularly for poets who like kind of changes in the world. So this is a poem about snow. It's also, as ever, of course, a poem about my family. If this poem were a mathematical formula, then it would be my family plus Olympic bobsleigh team, which as mathematical formulae for poems go. I'm amazed that no one else has got there before I did. My family as an Olympic bobsleigh team. My father drives, of course, so he's the first to leap over the side into the sled as we begin to hoof it down the run. We sprint. The light of snow reflecting off our mirrored visors now. And look, my mother, who hops in next and throws her arms around him, holding tight to him who guides us, drives us towards a snowblind future. Me and my sister bringing up the rear. We tuck our heads in as we round the corner. And it's teamwork now, the aerodynamics of us. Just one of us who's leaning the wrong way through these high turns, a millisecond, 2, can make mistakes of all our bodies, weights. Just one who's thinking right as we go left can have us on the ice or on our arse. We need all we can get if we're to pinch it from the brash Norwegians. Before we've even gulped, we're at the finish, taking off our helmets. My mother's checking everyone's okay. My father's wondering how we can shave that extra 100th of a second. My sister's fixing in a little mirror the mess up of her makeup. And me, I take a second, check my limbs, my good old brain. I punch the air. I yell again, again, again. And Paul kindly sent some requests for poems. I was hoping that I might get requests for The Green, Green Grass of Home or My Way. It's really kind of up my street, but I got requests for poems. So thank you for people who sent requests for poems. And this is one of those. This is requested by Pat Edwards. So thanks very much to Pat for requesting this. This is a poem about my father. I fully intend at some point in the future to write a poem about Pat Edwards and get my father to request it at the Zoom reading, just so I can complete the circle. Now this is a poem about my dad. And this is a poem about my dad buying sweets when he was a little kid. This happened in Park Street in Crosskeys. If anyone wants to visit and reenact the exciting events of this poem, the kind of Hollywood pitch meeting plot synopsis of this poem is my father buys some sweets and then eats one of them. That's a bit of a spoiler alert. You know what's going to happen at the end now. My father buying sweets, 1956. So here he is, 11, a little bugger, with his neat curls, his comprehensive training to be my lookalike. His mother's voice chases him down the terrace as he swaggers to the music of the coins in his pocket. His school tie, flipped over his shoulder, is a silk scarf sported by an artist strutting from one absinthe joint to another in 19th century Paris. Now he looks in the window of Mrs. Bullen's sweet shop. Reflection puts his face in a jar of chocolate toffees, grinning. Chimes announce him as he steps inside the shop, Mrs. Bullen's front room. Fearsome in pastels, she emerges, eyes him, places weights on one side of the scales, sweets on the other, offers him all she has of justice. I clatter into the till and he's out and walking home, a paper bag full in his palm. There are years in which the shop will go to bedsits, the bedsits to ruin. My father's mouth will bloom with fillings, but now his evening stretches deliciously ahead and he pauses helpfully beneath the streetlight, so we can watch him lift one gleaming thing from the bag and wrap it, raise it to his lips, so I can taste all the butter, cream, the sugar, here on the tip of my tongue. This is another poem about a shop. I have this kind of sequence on the go at the moment where I'm writing poems in voices. These are the voices of places. So they're the kind of things that places have got to say for themselves. And this is quite useful because it means I can delegate the writing of the poem to another voice. They can write the poem for me, you know, and I can get on with more economically productive activity while the place is writing the poem for me. This is what the corner shop has to say. So this is the corner shop's point of view. And what the corner shop has to say in this poem is that it's in love romantically with the corner shop owner. And I feel as though for all the celebration of romantic love in poetry, the romantic love of corner shops for their owners is relatively unexplored. So I'm trying to fill that gap. Corner shop. I love this hour when it's only us. The dust motes snow globe beautifully, and he sweeps round my floor and tidies my crammed shelves. He cares for me, and then we laugh together over the morning's headlines, the cartoons. I can't this last forever. Our idyll is broken by these first or fluoro-vested customers with all their appetite for lotto tickets, biscuits, Marlborough for breakfast. Then she slouches down, his wife, and he's a child again, out through the door to cover for the shiftless paperboy. I do not like this hour he's away. She spills nail varnish on my counter, smiles and smiles at the male customers. But then he's back, and it's just me, him, and the kids. They're making Brands Hatch of the shop floor. They are making Wembley of my doorway. It's been just a privilege to watch them grow, a joy, all these long years. All afternoon, the regulars who he could set his watch and his accounts by, pick up papers, tea, their chat from this time yesterday, and me, I'm right here by his side. And then it's night, and it's just me and him, just like it was first thing. What's love if it's not this? He pulls the thick shutters down to keep me safe, to keep me snug, and then he looks around one final time. And for a final time that day, he curses me again, and then he turns the light out, goes on up. This is another one of these poems from the same sequence, and this is requested by Julian Bishop. So thank you to Julian for requesting this next poem. And this is it does the same sort of job. It's from the point of view of a bridge, and it's a bridge in Newport. It's the bridge which goes from the main part of Newport into Maindy, and it's a bridge I know very well. The reason I know it very well is because there's one really good pub on one side of the bridge and another really good pub on the other side of the bridge. So as a result, you spend quite a lot of time walking across the bridge. But also I discovered that there was a story in the South Wales Argus, which is the local paper, which is a source I rely on for most of my poems, if I'm honest. And apparently this is quite a suicide hotspot. The river rescue team are quite active in this, underneath this bridge and in this area, and saving people. So I was struck by this because it's an area that I know very well. So this is what the bridge has to say for itself. Me, I get up early, see. I like the hour or so before the cars arrive, the sea sleeping there over my shoulder, the early morning sky that is all mine, a few girls spelling out with their bodies. I make the most of that because by 9, I bear the city's weight here on my back, all these commuting cars and belching vans. I hold my nose and try to keep control with traffic lights, lean out of their windows to swear, to drop their rubbish, spit on me, to smoke a cigarette and flick a burning butt on me. The days I like the best are Sundays, when I just lie in all day, the acupuncture of a gentle moped, or this hand-holding couple afternoon who linger at my apex, make my view the background to their love. I've heard it said our card is marked, the day is done. What with advances in technology, hot air balloons and tunnels, gravity. But what is this but human, really? To look at the distance from here to there and say, well, what's the shortest that could be? I do not like the nights, the river's tinnitus, and the low hum a taxi engine makes is like a dream of my own snoring. Worst are those who come to visit at that hour. Here, tonight, a young man walks alone towards my middle, smelling a Scotch bottle under arm. He reaches midway, looks down at the river, then clambers over, stands there on the ledge and holds on tight. I feel his warm touch there. Oh souls, believe me, I'd never let go if I could choose. I know by heart exactly what it is to just have too much weight to bear. This is another place poem. I'm getting to that stage where I've forgotten poems are in my own book. That's never a good sign, is it? This was requested by Bernadette Reed. So thanks so much for Bernadette for requesting this poem. And thanks to Bernadette for occasionally sending lovely emails about my poems. It's always very nice when that happens. I've never had a kind of, no one's ever sent me a horrible or email about any of my poems. I suppose that's when you really know you've got successful, isn't it? You know, I really despise your poem. This is the worst thing I've seen. So perhaps I'll aspire to that. But thank you to Bernadette for sending really lovely emails occasionally about poems. It's very much appreciated. And this poem is about Aberfan, which is obviously a really significant event in Welsh history, and you'll all know that this kind of this cold tip came down the mountain and decimated this school. And there's this fantastic book by Gaynor Madgwick, who was a survivor of Aberfan. They pulled her out of the rubble, and her brother was killed in that disaster. And it's an amazing work of non-fiction and memoir. And this poem came out of reading that book, Aberfan. So here they come from the assembly hall. So here they come from where they have been singing all things bright and beautiful. So here they come, this spring-limbed bobtail bunch, these gay-high heroes, ragamuffins, making slipstreams of their ties, who kick the air with joy at being them, who rush from the head teacher's voice, chasing them down the corridor. This one walking quickly with her head down and saying her times table in her head. This one tapping this one on the shoulder to whisper something there about her brother. This one, he's a monkey, taking bets on what he might or might not do at break time. So here they come around the corner now, with their bloodied knees, their untied laces, their tendency to spend the morning gazing somewhere over there into the classroom. They settle in their chairs, the world breathes in. And now, pause there. And now, oh now, pause there. I'm going to read a couple of animal poems. This is quite a change in mood. I'm going to read a couple of animal poems, and one of the things has been when I couldn't write a poem, like most of the time when I couldn't write a poem, I just go to the zoo and I just look at the animals and write a poem about them. And you can't do that now, of course. So I mean, it's birds. I mean, now it's birds because that's like yesterday, the birds in the snow, like birds in snow is like the best thing in the world. They're just like, what the hell is going on here? Like, how do I function? It's very, very good. Just watch the birds in snow for 20 minutes and you just feel massively happier. It's really good. So I'll read a couple of animal poems, and I can't do a reading without reading this poem. This is kind of my spirit animal of a poem. It's about the hippo is solo, incognito, two boulders curving out of dental murk. In a zoo, his photo advertises, doing a sponsored sitting still all day. Stop being a cliche, hippo, or I won't write a poem about you. Anyway, sorry. What is your body but the verb to wallow? What is the water but a part of self? Says you can crush a Ford Sierra between your jaws. They don't say how they test this. Candy floss high boys crowd your glass, betting they could hold their breath underwater longer. They could leap from one boulder to the other. I abandon you for the giraffes, stupid as window cleaners. The lions, sunshine with teeth, but keep coming back. If you were to rise, show your eyes, your mouth, would you have Martin Sheen's mud-crazy face, breaking smoke water in Apocalypse Now? Closing time. One last go. Oh, please, hippo, don't be so self-effacing, so tight-fisted. Come on out. Don't you know we love you? Wait, is that a flash of flesh, a hippo peep show? Or are you still snoozing? A little girl says, Dad, the island's moving. And this is another animal poem, and this is from this book, Humenagerie. This was requested by Sarah Doyle, who edited this anthology. It's a really fantastic anthology of animal poems, and it was a really lovely experience to be involved with writing for this, because there was just a feeling. I mean, Sarah's editing, you just felt as though you were in the hands of someone who really, really cared about the poems and about the poets, and that's not always the case with various writing projects. So I'm really grateful to Sarah for being involved in this project. And do get a hold of Humenagerie if you get a chance. It's quite fantastic. And so the brief was that you had to write a poem about changing into an animal, like metamorphosis sort of thing. So I did this really in the title. The title is "And Then I Was a Sheep." I felt as though if I got the transformation happening off stage, I'd have fulfilled the criteria very early. You know, I didn't have to worry about it then later in the poem. And then I was a sheep, and really, what a treat to find myself among these friend-shaped clouds or cloud-shaped friends who breathe, who bleat, these lovely bits of meat on legs, who take me as something to smell and imitate. How nice it was to wake and sing myself, to flounce and fling myself down hillsides. Someone turned to trampolines quite suddenly. While others keep their snouts steadfastly to the ground, I blink. I count my gifts, the four-wheel drive and the cuisine that grows, the way that I can sigh and mean that nature is my playground, baby. True, the farmer, shearing, has looked into my eyes a little longer than I'd like, as if he's sussed, he's twigged, and yes, the sheepdog nips more keenly at my ankles than the others. But on the whole, I found it's easy, really, to blend right in, to not stand out. Sometimes I miss the feel of the settee beneath me, a glass of something good, but all in all, I wouldn't go back if I could. I'm less lonely than I was when I was human. The world's less cold, now that my winter coat is part of me. And what I really like are moonlight nights, us lot, the whole, the flock, how we all cutch together in this field, one living mass of white, one foggy cloud, the awesome power of our communal brains. As if we turned the field into the sky, like we could think it now, and it would rain. This anthology also features one of my proudest moments as a writer, which is the fact that the word "kutch" has a footnote, so English translation. I don't know if you can see that, but I really love that. I got a footnote for the word "kutch" in an English translation. It's untranslatable, really, but it's lovely that that's there. This is a poem about a nun. This was requested by Mary Davis, so thanks to Mary for requesting this. And I think this is probably the same Mary who came on the T Newydd course last autumn, so hello to Mary. And the nun is riding a bicycle. This happened in Italy. The nun just came bombing past me on a bicycle, and immediately I just thought poem, and it just wrote itself, really. Nun on a bicycle. Now here she comes, rattling over cobbles, powered by her sandals, the gentle downhill and the grace of God. Now here she comes, her habit what it was always waiting to become, a slipstream. Past stop signs, the pedestrian traffic at rush hour, the humdrum mopeds, on a day already 30 in the shade. With her robe fluttering like solid air, she makes her own weather. Who could blame her? As the hill sharpens, she picks up speed and smiles into her future. If she interrupted the Our Fathers she's saying in her head, to say, we, a gentle we, under her breath. Oh, cycle, sister, look at you now, freewheeling through the air conditioning of the morning. Who's to say the God who isn't there isn't looking down on you and grinning? I'm just going to read 2 more poems. I don't know where we are for time, but I'm pretty confident this is less than the promised 12 hours. So I think we're okay. So 2 more poems, and they're both about famous people. And one thing that happened in my life recently is that, I mean, as Paul mentioned, I was editing this magazine, and there was an interview. Obviously, there's a job interview process if you become the editor of the magazine, and the job interview is like every job interview you've ever had in your life. It's like you sit on one side of the table, and on the other side of the table sit everyone else in the world, really, as far as you can make out, you know, and asking you things like, well, you know, we'll begin with an 8-part question, you know, and then as you're trying to work your way through this and you're trying to remember what part 7 was as you're answering part 3, one of them begins just to click their pen, you know, just click, 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 at the exact pace of your thinking. So as your thoughts are formulating these answers, click, 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 click. You know, at that point in my life, really, and I think anyone in this position would have been the same, the thought that came into my head about this process that was evolving in front of me was, what would R.S. Thomas think? And as a result, this poem came about. The poem has a very long title, which sort of does the job. If you get a long title, then the poem's sort of done, so you don't have to worry about it. The title of this poem is The Reincarnated Ghost of R.S. Thomas, interviewed for the position of editor of Poetry Wales, November 2019. He sits there in his dog collar, one leg crossed over the other. As usual, in lieu of a hairdo, he wears that sort of panicked seagull perched there on top of his head. As the panel chairman tip-taps his laptop, brings up the next question. So, Mr. Thomas, can you run us through your exact ideas for how you promote the magazine via Twitter, Facebook, or other social media? RS raises a hand to his mouth, offers a mumbled something or other, referencing Kierkegaard, Jarl Prythach, the way things are going in this terrible century. The young MBA from the marketing department listens closely, carefully, then thumbs a note of his answer into his smartphone. It is late when the telephone rings in his outlandish cottage, and a voice tells him they valued his thoughtful responses, his ideas for the greater involvement of the Welsh language, the feature he suggested on poems and bird watching. But they'd finally settled on a young performance poet from the suburbs of Cardiff who had BBC contacts and, at the last count, more than 1,000 followers. It is later than that when the youngster with the MBA, unable quite to shake something off, dials his numbers, her head full of the way he just sat there, the words on his breath or the birds in his hairdo. And it's for this moment, now, when anyone passing the walls of that cottage, as weather sets in and wind whistles round it, might make out a telephone, quiet ringing and ringing from there, inside a long empty home. And just one final poem. This is, if you're going to write a poem about R.S. Thomas, it's inevitable that your next poem will be about Kurt Cobain. And I was reading this biography of Kurt Cobain by Charles Cross, which I borrowed from a friend many, many years ago. I probably shouldn't say this publicly because I think he's forgotten that I've still got this book. He might want it back now if I say it. It's a very good biography. And one thing that is talked about in that book is that Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, when they were courting, I do like the word courting. My nan used to use it all the time, although not about Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, I must admit. But when they were courting, they were in different continents, and this is not like at a time when mobile phones are happening. So one of the ways that they managed this was by fax machine, because this is like early 90s, right? So there in my head, there's this image of Kurt Cobain hunched over an early 90s fax machine as it prints out that it's like one line per minute biddy printer rate, these kind of sexually explicit faxes from Courtney Love, which I think is a lovely image, really. So that's where this poem comes from. So I'll finish with this, and a massive thank you to Paul for having me at this event. And I think, like lots of poets, lots of you probably know this, but before Paul retired, the work that he did for the Poetry Society was just phenomenal. I think, like a lot of poets, I owe a huge debt to Paul, particularly for work on poetry surgery over the last year. So massive thanks to Paul for that, and massive thanks to Paul for this evening. And thanks to everyone for listening. Perhaps you weren't listening, I've got no idea. Perhaps you just the earplugs in. But the good thing about online readings is you can't get heckled, so it's all good. I've enjoyed it anyway, so thanks for listening. Kurt Cobain receives a fax from Courtney Love, Royal Hotel, Amsterdam, November 1991. The fax will later be found folded in the inside pocket of a jacket in a wardrobe at the house he will die in. It will be auctioned for $50,000 in a lot which includes the jacket, a Nirvana logoed frisbee, a toothbrush he may once have used. It will be quoted in a biography. It will take the writer 4 years and 400 interviews to complete. And the quotation will be disputed by Love herself or the legal representatives of Love herself. There are 3 years between the fax being sent and Cobain's death. 3 years in which he gets married, becomes a father, sells 4 million records, and consumes so much heroin, Seattle fills with dealers who will not sell to him. None of that matters to the man who stands here now, the business center of a 5-star hotel in Amsterdam, 2 in the morning, waiting for a fax from the woman he loves. She's on tour with her band in Chicago, or he forgets, Boston, and he's hunched here at the fax machine, waiting for it to print so slowly. 20 years before smartphones, texts, Tinder, and the most famous musicians on the planet are in different time zones, wooing each other by fax. Now his eyes scan down, past the explicit sexual reference, the scatological puns, the allusions to the lyrics of obscure guitar bands, the straightforward gobbledygook, to what he wants to see, the way she signs off. There are holes in his sweater, track marks in his arms. The latest estimate puts his personal fortune at $3 million. And anyone passing the glass wall of the business center now, walking along this plush carpet, may look in and see this: a man alone in a room, tearing from a machine a fax, then punching the air, then hugging it to his chest, then beginning slowly, shyly, shufflingly to dance.
Dio and Jonathan Edwards. Thank you very much, Jonathan. And